So you fire away, and if we can answer you, we will do.
Okay then, so if you just start by telling me your name.
I'm Armo Collini. My father emigrated from Italy in 1913. His father was here before him, and they were knife grinders. And they've always been knife grinders. I'm one myself, and my son is also a knife grinder, so it's still in the family. And we're looking at over 100 years of knife grinding in the Collini family. My father and mother ran a boarding house in Guildford Street off of Gray's Inn Road for 53 years. Before there was another Collini who had the house for a little while, and when he sold it to Mum and Dad, he moved on to Southend. Their families have drifted off, and we haven't really got much contact with them. My uncle Gabriele Collini was interned. He was collected by the, I think it was something 18B, under 18B detention or something, and then he was taken away and he went to the Isle of Man. He was there for 2-3 years, not too long, and then he was released. I know that amongst the knife grinding community there were 2 maestranzes who were interned, some cowlers, Binellis were also interned, 2 Binellis, and then there would have been 1 or 2 others as well. Exact record I haven't got right now. And they all turned out all right, apart from 2 of the cowlers who died within a few weeks that they were at the camp. They contracted contagious diseases and they died, pneumonia or cancer, I don't know. They're both buried at Kensal Green Cemetery. And also the youngest internee was their younger brother, Agostino, who's still alive and lives in Pinsolo in Val Rendena, Trentino. Yeah, his brother, Jack, wasn't interned. He was my best man, as a matter of fact, and he's still alive. He's in northern Italy, and he's married, and he's still going strong, 80 odd, yodels a lot, and does a lot of cartoons, and keeps a lot of the British tradition alive in Pinsolo. A lot of the knife grinders, or a lot of the people that were here before, have still got fond memories, I think, of England. Although they were born in Italy and they love to go back to the Trentino and that, they still have got fond memories of England, I think.
So the Trentino was the area that
yeah.
You said that your granddad...
My granddad came from the Trentino along with some other fellows because they found that sharpening knives gave them a living, right? They were rural farmers, mountain farmers, and then during the war, or rather during the winter period when the snows came down, they used to take these barrows, sharpening barrows, and go down to Milan and places like that, and they found that they could earn a living. And then they found that they could make reasonable money, so they started to emigrate. They went to all over Europe and then on to America, Australia. There isn't a place they haven't been to practically. And they've settled and they've done very well and that.
So your granddad would have been one of the generations maybe who walked?
Yes.
Right, some of them pushed the barrows all the way across Europe, taking their time, and then put them on the boat and crossed over. The first knife grinder from our part of the world arrived in London in 1870. It was a Mr. Beltrami from Massimeno. Massimeno is the smallest comune in Italia. Yeah, it's noted for that. It's got a population of about 84. It's still there, they're doing very well, and they've still got a few knife grinders dispersed all over. Because we were a tightly knit family, the knife grinders, many of whom went to America, formed a big association in New York, and that is some 80 years old, I believe now. We formed one in London, Before the war, the 1940 war, there was a small group, but it wasn't really an association. And then in 1970, we formed the Knife Grinders Association, London Grinders Association, with the idea of purchasing all the necessary items we needed in bulk, and also operating a social thing to keep all our families together, which has been very successful over the years. And then it goes on and on.
So your granddad came over here and he settled here, and your father was born and also...
No, my father was born in Italy. At that time, the old boys used to come here, stay here for a year or two, save money all the time, and then return to Italy, leave their giri, they used to call them the giri, the rounds. They used to leave those to another grinder, go back and live a year in Italy, and still keep up a little bit of farming or whatever, or change their money and buy a property or something. I remember my father telling me that Granddad went back to Italy with a lot of English pounds, and he changed them at a rate which he thought was very, very good, and 6 months later he could have got another 5 times as much. So although he did all right, he could have done a lot better. And then there were the Ferraris who had the shop in Soho, and they did very well when they changed their money. They bought 1 or 2 hotels in Pinsolo, in that area there, and it goes on from there.
So did your dad was born in Italy?
My dad was born in Italy
1918.
in
1900.
1900.
Your dad was born in 1900?
1900. He came here in 1913. At that time, he was an Austrian. So when the war came out, he was an alien, right? And of course, they were enemies, because Italy was with England in the First World War, but against in the Second World War. So at that time, he went back to Italy in 1920 after the war, and my uncle Gabriele came over. They swapped over for a little while, and then my grandfather, I think, retired in about 1930 and lived for good in Italy after that.
So why was your dad Austrian nationality?
Because
he was born under the Austrian Empire.
That part of Italy was governed by Austria then.
The Trentino was annexed to Italy after the 1914-18 war. They actually fought on the mountains above the valley. They've got the fields there and all the story of all the cannons and that on the mountains.
So this includes Bolzano then?
But further over,
yeah.
Right. Bolzano still speak the traditional, they've got the German.
It's divided, they've got some schools teaching Italian.
Yeah. No, we always spoke Italian.
The Tyrol.
That's the Tyrol. We're a bit further over, and we were always spoke Italian, but we were under the emperor, the Austrian emperors. It came down as far as Tione and Stenico. Stenico was has got an old castle there that passed all the laws, and there was a palace there that the Austrian Empire used to come to during the summer months. This was before the First World War, and then afterwards, So grandfather used to go back. The women didn't come over with their husbands until much later, until, for instance, my father returned to Italy in 1930. He got married and he brought his wife over. And that's why Avi, myself, and the rest of us were all born here. Then, because I was a handful, I used to hit her on the head with the hammer, right? Oh, yeah, I was a terror. My mother couldn't manage. She had the boarding house as well, and she had Avi as a little baby. So I went back to live with my grandfather, and I was in Pinsolo for about 3 to 4 years as a young boy. I went to the nursery classes there, and 50 years later, my grandson went to the same one, which is something different, you know. Yeah.
So your dad was here during the Second World War?
Yes, he was here.
But was he interned?
No, he was 13 at the time, right? He went...
No, not in the Second World War.
No, the First World War.
Yeah.
And in the Second World War, he wasn't. I told you before, he wasn't interned. they came and collected my uncle Gabriele, who lived with us, who wasn't married, but they left my father alone.
Did they give any explanation?
No. There was my father. There was a Mr. Amatore Binelli, who was the father of the two boys who used to play the accordion, Ettore and Marino. He was their father. And Jack Collini, who died last year. Those three didn't get interned. All the other grinders that were about got interned. There was a Teasy from East Stratford who had 9 kids. He got interned. Yeah.
Oh, he was sent to the Isle of Man.
He was sent to the Isle of Man and then he was released. There was another Beltrame who used to work with my father called Egidio. He got interned and then he got released because he was willing to go and work on the bomb sites, clearing the bomb sites. Some of them got out from the Isle of Man on that premise. Instead, there was a Mr. Maestranzi, Valentino, who's written half a book and he's got a lot of information. He's an elderly gentleman, he's dead now, an elder gentleman, 1800 and something he was born. He had to do service for the Italian army, right, in Vladivostok. He had to go on the Russian front in the First World War. And he got sent over to Siberia and he didn't come back from Russia until 1926, 27. He spent many years interned over there. And then when he came back here, he got interned again in 1940 and he did 5 years. He was one of the last ones to be released. In the Isle of Man, he was interned for a further 5 years. His family, luckily, were in Pinsolo, in the Varendena. He'd sent them up for holiday just before the war. My friend Vito, his brother Aldo, they're both alive, and Mary, they were in Italy with the mother, and then they came over in 1946 when their father had been here about a year, had got released, and he brought them back again. But he spent a lot of time in the camps.
And also they took the radio from Dad, didn't they?
Yeah, we weren't allowed, Father wasn't allowed to use a radio. They also used to work with a van at that time and they didn't give him the petrol to use in the van. But they changed their mind on that because he was sharpening knives for government canteens, essential work, butchers and that. They allowed him to reuse the van and they allowed him the petrol allowance to use the van again. But he went back to using the barrow after 10 years or more. He'd been using the van. And I went out with him during the war years. I used to meet him from school. He had one barrow in central London and another barrow in London. And we used to do 2 days' work in central London, push the barrow and sharpen the knives on the barrow, which wasn't easy. Not after being mechanically minded, you know, with a motor and a machine to make the stone go round. It was a lot of hard work then.
What was it like for you at school then, being born here, but having parentage from an enemy country?
I was little Mussolini, right? But because I went to St. Peter's School, and there were quite a few Italians there, we had no trouble there. Then I went to St. Bernard's in the East End, near Shadwell, and there were also 1 or 2 Italians, and it wasn't too bad. When people started returning from World War I, soldiers who'd been in Italy and in, on the Eastern Front, the 8th Army, and they'd seen that the people there were more or less like the people here, ordinary people wanted to get on with life. I think the Italian thing came over a lot better, we weren't considered, or we may have been called wops and that eye-ties during the war, but I don't think, did you?
No.
I never really, we got called a few names, but we never had any serious trouble as such. And I always kept out of trouble if I can, You can't win if you meet up with bullies like that,
Did you have any news from your uncle on the Isle of Man at all?
Well, he used to write, the letters were censored, so we knew, and then as soon as he got released, he came and lived with my mum and dad as well. And then he went back to Italy and he didn't get married until late in life, about 1950 odd. He got married quite late. But he used to suffer from stomach troubles. So, you know, at that time he had to be very, very careful. And for many years, he had to eat a particular diet, only white meat and stuff like that. But he lived to 93 or 98 years old in the end. So he must have looked after himself all right.
So what must have been like for the wives of all the Arrotini who were ended up on the Isle of Man? What was like?
They were without. There was one who happened to be. She happened to be she was my wife's auntie. I met my wife, obviously, in 1957, and got married then, so it was different. But I found out that she was my wife's auntie, the only relation that my wife, who came from Italy, had over here. So I got to know all the family very well. And this Mr. Teasy, her husband, was interned, and she had 9 children. And she had an Anderson shelter out in the back garden, and when the rockets and the V-bombs started coming over, she was in the Anderson shelter with all these kids, and they had a rough time. They used to use jam jars for their cups of tea and that, you know. They had a rough time. How bad, I don't know, but all the children have done marvellously well. All the lot of them. They've all really done very well. You've got a couple of doctors and another one who's done very well in business. And the eldest one is a knife grinder still, Alfred. He could tell you maybe a little bit more. Yeah. There's also, in Smithfield, they're still there, the cafe, Beppy's Cafe.
That's right.
You know Beppy's Cafe? Yeah, the grandfather there, because it's Sedgwick in there now. Sedgwick and his cousin, right? They run the cafe, but their mum and dad, rather Sedgwick's lost both of his mum and dad. The girl, she's got her mum and dad are still alive. They've just retired. Tony Papini, he's a bit younger than me, and his dad was interned. And I remember going there with meeting my dad at Holborn Viaduct. And we'd always go and have a cup of tea at 4 o'clock after school. I used to meet my dad, and my dad still had to sharpen the knives for the police station, the Holborn Viaduct station, and the cafe there. And he used to take me there, and we'd have a cup of tea and 2 slices of jam. And the mother was running the cafe.
The mother who was, you know what her name is?
What?
Bruna Bonino.
Bruna Bonino. No, that's the auntie.
Oh.
That Bruna, she's still alive, isn't she? Yes, she's the auntie. It's her mum and dad. Her mother ran the cafe. She's the eldest,
She helped
Bruna.
out. She helped out.
No, she's not now. She's retired now.
Not because I went to. Have you been to that cafe?
I go every week. I have my meal there. I know him inside out. Yeah. Bonino is, I think, her husband's name. Obviously, yeah. She got married, and her 2 brothers were Carlo and Tony. Tony's still alive. Carlo died just about 2 years or more ago. You know, yeah. Her mum and dad ran the cafe, and there's a picture there of them. You know, the old man there, and they've got a little book photograph on one of the pictures of all the expenses of the cafe. That's something, a souvenir, and they've got it up on the wall. 2 and 6pence, 1 and 2pence, you know. Yeah, I was born in King's Cross Road in a 1-bedroom flat.
With a sleep
and Mrs. Jacong used to take her children to the nursery or something. She knew my mum very well, Mrs. Jacong. Marietta there, yeah. And that was in King's Cross Road. You know, they've all moved. I mean, so many houses, even down Clerkenwell Road and down Farringdon Road, blocks of flats have all been demolished and that, and they've all moved out. Then after the war, when, as I said before, when the Italians got appreciated a lot more, then a lot of them started doing a lot better. And those that came over from Italy, my goodness, they had connections here, and they all started opening up, and they've all done very well. One experience I had with my father, which wasn't one, I'll never forget that. We used to go out on a Saturday. I used to go out with him because I wasn't at school and give him a hand. And we used to work at Streatham at that time. So he'd sharpen the knives and I'd run backwards and forwards, and I used to have a little doctor's bag. And I used to put all the knives in the doctor's bag, go and collect them from the shops and bring them to him, and he'd be sharpening them on the Arrotini machine there, you know. And then we used to have to go and eat at lunchtime. And we used to go to, there was only one cafe there, and he wouldn't give us a lunch. He used to let us have a baked jam roll and custard and a cup of tea. He never had a lunch for us. Other people would come in and he'd give them the lunch. We used to sharpen his knives, but we used to have to sit at the first table. We couldn't go right in. He said, sit there, please. My father never used to argue with anybody, right? And he used to just give him, and so we used to go to Zita's, was a sort of a bread shop come cake shop, and sometimes we used to buy a loaf of bread, and he'd get a couple of eggs or something, and we boiled eggs, bring them with us, so we had a bit more to eat. I was only 11, 12, and you get hungry at that age, you know, but they wouldn't serve us a meal. I'll never forget that. Another time, well, I remember that Mum had the boarding house, and of course you had the rations. We were very lucky because we dealt with butcher shops and grocery shops. Dad had one or two English gentlemen, you know, really nice managers who always felt sorry for my dad, and they used to say, if you want a bit of beef or some eggs and bacon, just have a word with me. So he always managed to get a bit extra than the rations. They used to give him a bit on the side, pay for it, you know, and we never starved. And I remember my mother paying eggs in 1941-42, 10 shillings a dozen for eggs. Now, 10 shillings in those days was a lot of money, because if you got £3 in a week, that was it, you know. But she had the boarding house. During the war, she did a lot of work, a lot of business when the Americans came over. In 1944, 45, they were based in Cambridgeshire, and one or two came down and then they'd bring down all their dried eggs. We never missed a thing then. We used to get sweets and everything. We had a good time then. She had them sleeping all over the house. Someone should have 25, 30. We only had 15, room for 15 really, beds, but 25, they'd sleep on the floor. Mrs. Collini, doesn't matter, we'll sleep on the floor.
And some of these young servicemen who are of Italian origin still write to us at Christmas now.
For many years.
Ask the children. Yeah.
Why does it stay in your mind that that guy in Streatham didn't serve you the lunch? Is it because
we were Italians.
Is it because you were going in beforehand?
No, we used to go in at lunchtime. We used to sharpen the knives. He only had 2 or 3 knives, and it was the only cafe. So we had to go and have something to eat during the day, and we'd go there. And I remember he told my dad, you sit in the first table.
It was like
and it was like all the partitions, you know, they're going up to the top. Now he'd go up after to the top to go to the kitchen and get the knives, and then he'd bring them back, and then he'd come to the table. And I remember him telling me, sit at the table there. And the other thing he told me, now don't make you laugh, right, because we used to have tea, right, he always told me how to drink tea, because in those days the cups were, you know, you could pick up anything from cups you didn't know, and he always told me how to drink tea, like that, the way you put your lip to the cup. And sometimes I do it at home even now. You know, it's just, you never know these cups here, there might be, I mean, there was some real louts when in the cafe. Well, the only cafe there was in Streatham.
And the Italians weren't well seen then.
No, you know, they used to, Johnny, you know, hello, I and that. Going back, but that goes back even further to the First World War, the knife grinders then, because they were Austrian and they were down at Smithfield, they used to get pushed about. You can imagine those fellows down Smithfield that shift the meat around. I mean, they're big, what do they call them? Bummeries, right? They're big fellows. And there was a few louts down there. And one of them, the knife grinder was doing his sharpening the tools for the butchers and that. He comes along and starts pushing him. And the others joined in, you know, and they started getting behind him and pushing him. And he almost cut himself, you know. He couldn't do nothing. It was 3 or 4 of them. And a Neapolitan ice cream man came by, and he used to put the barrows in that little Saffron Hill just by the side of the church. There was a yard there, and a few families lived there. The Maestrances were a family that lived there, right? And he'd keep his barrow in there, so he knew the knife grinder, you know. Oh, amico mio, what's happening here? Non mi lasciano stare, you know. So Lascia fare me. He got his big wooden thing, but he put 4 of them on the floor. They called the police and everything. Police come along and they explained what he done. Right, off you go. They never touched that knife grinder again. And it sticks in the memory. I was about 15 when my dad told me that. I'll never forget that, It's a true story. True story. He put 4 or 5 of them on the floor and they left him alone after that. So we didn't get treated too bad, they got away with all sorts of things during the war. Another time, my father, this was during the war, he used to sharpen the knives for the leather market at Bermondsey, what used to be the leather market there. It's not there anymore now. And it was a big colonnade, something like St. Peter's Square, on a much smaller scale. St. Peter's, all the colonnades round there. And all the pelts from the cows were in the middle, and then they used to take them underneath these colonnades and skin them and take all the thing and then put them back, and then they'd get treated, and some of them were dipped into the material there and that. Anyhow, they used to work overnight, the fellows down there, and he always had quite a bit of business. He used to go down there and he'd be down there for 2 or 3 hours sharpening knives, right? And he went down there and he got down there and they'd dropped a bomb right in the middle and they'd killed, quite a few of them, right? And they used to call my dad Harry at that time.
Wasn't John?
No, well, the butchers used to call him John, but he was called Harry, it depended, they were all cockneys and that. Oh, it's a very bad Harry. We've lost a few of the boys. He says, we're clubbing together. So, he says, I remember he put a few coppers or shillings in the thing, and he went home. He couldn't work anymore, my dad. He just went home. He'd had enough that day. Yeah. Another time, he got blasted by the blast from a bomb in just off Brixton Hill. Got thrown across the road. The bomb was 4 or 5 houses away. He came down. The blast, they get the blast. It shifted him and the barrel across the road. Clements the Butcher's not there anymore now. But every time we went to do Clements the Butcher, he used to tell me about it.